The morning started like any other: quiet street, trimmed lawns, and neighbors pretending not to watch each other from behind their curtains. I had just finished a long overnight shift and parked my patrol car in my driveway, the same way I always did after work. Uniform folded in the back seat, radio silent, lights off. To me, it was just another exhausted return home. To someone else, it was apparently a problem worth starting a war over. I didn't see her at first. But she saw me. Every single time. She was the kind of neighbor who treated WA rules like sacred scripture. Perfect hedges, spotless windows, always watching. The type who believed the neighborhood existed solely to meet her standards. As I stepped out of the car, she stared from across the street, arms folded, expression tight. I gave a polite nod, the universal signal for good morning, without conversation. She didn't nod back. Instead, she pulled out her phone. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe she was texting someone, maybe checking messages. But her eyes never left my driveway. Later that day, while I slept, the emails started spreading through the community board. Someone had reported a suspicious police vehicle parked overnight, claiming it made residents feel uncomfortable and unsafe. The WA president promised immediate action. I woke to 3 missed calls and a voicemail marked urgent. When I listened, I nearly laughed. "Sir, we've received a complaint," the WA manager said stiffly. "Residents are concerned about unauthorized law enforcement presence on private property." Unauthorized. I sat up in disbelief. That unauthorized presence was me. My assigned patrol unit, parked at my own house. But the best part, she had no idea. I decided not to respond immediately. Experience had taught me patience. People reveal more when they think they're winning. The next evening, I parked exactly the same way and waited. Curtains moved across the street. Her silhouette appeared again. Phone out. Recording. Minutes later, 2 WA board members walked down my driveway with forced smiles. "Sir," one began, "we're going to need you to remove the police vehicle." I leaned against the door calmly. "Why? It violates community comfort standards," he said. I paused. Then I slowly reached into the car, pulled out my badge, and clipped it onto my belt. Their faces changed instantly. Before anyone could speak, a second patrol car rolled slowly down the street, stopping right in front of my house. My partner stepped out, waving casually. The neighbor across the street froze. And that's when the real story began. The WA board members stood frozen on my driveway, eyes darting between my badge and the patrol car now parked at the curb. The confident tone they walked up with vanished instantly. My partner, still leaning casually against his car, watched the scene with quiet amusement, clearly sensing something entertaining unfolding. One of the board members cleared his throat. "We didn't realize." "No," I said calmly, "you didn't ask." Across the street, the neighbor who started all this stepped back behind her curtains, but not fast enough. I caught the movement. She wasn't embarrassed. She was angry. The kind of angry that doubles down instead of apologizing. The WA president tried to recover control. "Well, regardless," he began carefully, "some residents still feel uncomfortable having a police vehicle visible overnight." I stared at him for a moment, measuring my response. I'd dealt with worse than WA politics during my years on the force, but something about this situation felt absurdly personal. My driveway was suddenly community property in their eyes. "It's my assigned vehicle," I said. "Department policy allows me to park it at home." He nodded slowly, realizing there wasn't much he could argue against. They mumbled a few polite words before walking away, clearly eager to end the conversation. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, another email hit the neighborhood inbox. This time it was longer, more dramatic. The same neighbor claimed the police car was an intimidation tactic and accused me of trying to police the neighborhood from my driveway. Comments exploded underneath. Some defended me, saying a law enforcement presence actually made them feel safer. Others stayed silent, not wanting trouble. Then the WA announced an emergency meeting. That word, emergency, always means drama. I arrived in plain clothes, but I noticed whispers the moment I walked in. Chairs scraped softly. Eyes followed me. The complaining neighbor sat near the front, posture stiff, a folder full of papers on her lap like she was preparing for court. When the meeting started, she spoke first. This vehicle creates fear, she said, voice trembling with theatrical emotion. We don't know what's happening next door. I almost laughed. The HOA president turned toward me. Would you like to respond? I stood slowly. Sure, I said. I'm a police officer. That's my assigned patrol car. It's parked legally on my property. And honestly, I thought having an officer living here would make people feel safer, not fearful. Murmurs spread through the room. The neighbor's face reddened. You should have told us. I shrugged. You could have asked. Silence filled the room. Then someone in the back raised a hand. Wait, if he's police, doesn't that mean we're reporting the police to the police? A few chuckles broke out. The neighbor slammed her folder shut, furious. But I noticed something else. She wasn't done. Not even close. As the meeting ended, she leaned toward the HOA president and whispered something urgent. His expression tightened instantly, and that's when I realized this was about to get worse. The meeting ended with awkward smiles and forced politeness, but the tension followed everyone into the parking lot. I noticed the HOA president avoiding eye contact with me, walking quickly beside the neighbor who had filed the complaint. She spoke in sharp whispers, gesturing toward my house like it was a crime scene. Whatever she was saying, it wasn't over. I drove home feeling uneasy. Most people think police officers enjoy confrontation, but the truth is we spend enough time handling conflict at work. Home is supposed to be the quiet place. That night, I parked my patrol car as usual, locked it, and went inside, hoping the neighborhood drama would fade. Instead, my phone buzzed. A text from another neighbor. Hey, just heard the HOA might try to fine you. I stared at the screen, confused. Fine me for parking my assigned vehicle in my own driveway. The next morning proved it wasn't a rumor. A formal notice sat taped to my door. The HOA claimed my patrol car violated a commercial vehicle restriction and demanded removal within 48 hours or penalties would begin. I almost admired the creativity. The car wasn't commercial, it was government issued. But rules, I had learned, are often twisted by people who think confidence equals authority. I took a deep breath, scanned the document, and noticed something interesting. The complaint listed only one resident as the reporting party. Her. It was personal. Later that afternoon, I saw her walking her dog past my house. She slowed down deliberately, eyes fixed on the patrol car. You got the notice? She asked smugly. I did, I replied calmly. Rules apply to everyone, she said. I nodded. They do. She smiled, clearly believing she had the upper hand. You'll have to move it. I didn't argue. I just watched her walk away, already planning my next move. That evening, I called my department's legal liaison and explained the situation. There was a long pause on the line, followed by laughter. You're kidding, the lieutenant said. I wish I was. He promised to send documentation proving my right to keep the vehicle at my residence. But then he added something unexpected. You know, he said, if they push this too far, the department might take an interest. That sentence lingered in my mind. The following day, I checked my mailbox and found another surprise, a neighborhood flyer calling for increased law enforcement against unauthorized security vehicles. It wasn't subtle. She had rallied support. I looked around at the quiet street. Curtains moved again. People watching, waiting. Fine. If they wanted attention, they were about to get it. That evening, instead of coming home alone, I pulled into my driveway followed by 2 additional patrol units. Not lights, not sirens, just routine presence. Officers stepping out, chatting casually like any normal visit. The neighbor's jaw dropped across the street. Windows opened. Phones came out. And as I greeted my colleagues, the HOA president's car turned the corner, braking hard at the sight. He stepped out slowly, face pale. Officer, he said nervously, what exactly is going on? I smiled. Just making sure everything here follows the rules. The HOA president stood in my driveway, eyes flicking between the patrol cars and the officers chatting casually near my garage. Nothing dramatic was happening. No flashing lights, no raised voices, but the presence alone shifted the entire atmosphere of the street. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Phones recorded quietly. Word spread fast. I could almost feel the balance of power changing. Is there a problem? I asked politely. The president swallowed. No, we just didn't expect this. I gestured toward my coworkers laughing beside the patrol units. "They're visiting. Happens when you work long shifts together." He nodded stiffly, clearly uncomfortable. The woman who filed the complaint stepped onto her lawn, arms crossed, but she didn't come closer. For the first time, she looked uncertain. The officers stayed only a few minutes before leaving, but the message was clear: I wasn't isolated, and I certainly wasn't breaking rules. Still, I knew this wasn't finished. People who start public fights rarely walk away quietly. The next day, the HOA sent another letter. This one wasn't a warning, it was a fine. $500 for failing to remove a restricted vehicle. I stared at the number and laughed under my breath. Then I called the HOA office. "Hi," I said calmly. "I received your fine notice. Before I respond officially, I'd like clarification. Are you saying the HOA has authority over department-issued law enforcement vehicles?" The receptionist hesitated. I'll have to ask." Within an hour, the president called back sounding nervous. "We're just enforcing community guidelines." "I understand," I said. "I'll be forwarding this to my department's legal division." Silence. That evening, something strange happened. Several neighbors approached me while I worked in the yard. One thanked me for making the area feel safer. Another admitted they thought the complaint was ridiculous but were afraid to speak up during meetings. Slowly, the narrative was changing. The complaining neighbor noticed too. She walked over abruptly, voice tense. "You're turning people against me." I looked up from trimming a bush. "I haven't said anything. You brought police cars here." "I live here," I replied evenly. "My job came with me." Her face tightened. "This neighborhood isn't a precinct." "No," I said calmly. "It's a neighborhood, and I'm your neighbor." She stormed off, clearly frustrated that the confrontation wasn't escalating the way she wanted. That night, I received an email from the department's legal counsel. Attached was an official statement confirming my right to park the vehicle at home, along with a polite warning reminding the HOA that interference could carry serious legal consequences. I printed it out and prepared to attend the next HOA meeting. When I arrived, the room was packed. The president looked exhausted. The complaining neighbor sat stiffly, avoiding my eyes. I handed over the documents. As the president read them, his face slowly drained of color. The room fell silent. Then someone whispered, "Wait, are we in trouble?" I leaned back quietly. The president cleared his throat, voice shaking slightly. "We may need to reconsider this matter." But before he could continue, the meeting room doors opened. Two people in suits stepped inside. And they weren't from the HOA. The room went completely silent as the two suited individuals stepped inside. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the air felt heavier. They carried folders stamped with official seals, moving with the calm confidence of people who didn't need permission to be there. The HOA president stood quickly. "Can we help you?" One of them nodded politely. "We're here on behalf of the city legal department." A ripple of whispers spread through the room. I stayed seated, arms crossed, watching the expressions around me shift from curiosity to anxiety. The complaining neighbor stared, confusion replacing her usual certainty. She clearly expected backup, not this. The second official opened a folder. "We received communication regarding enforcement actions taken against a law enforcement officer's assigned patrol vehicle. We'd like clarification on the HOA's position." The president's face turned pale. "It's just a community rules issue." The official gave a calm smile. "That's what we're here to discuss." I could feel everyone watching me now, like I was suddenly the center of something bigger than a neighborhood disagreement. Honestly, I wasn't enjoying the spotlight. But I also knew this situation had gone far beyond personal complaints. The officials asked for copies of the warnings and fines issued to me. Papers passed across the table with shaky hands. One official flipped through them carefully, occasionally making notes. The silence was brutal. Finally, he looked up. "Did anyone here verify whether the vehicle fell under federal or municipal protection before issuing penalties?" No one answered. The president cleared his throat. "We assumed." The official nodded slowly. "Assumptions can create liability." That word landed hard. Liability. The complaining neighbor suddenly spoke up. "But residents were uncomfortable. We have a right to feel safe." The official turned toward her politely. "And this officer lives here, correct?" She hesitated. "Yes." "Then this is also his home," he said gently. The presence of a marked patrol vehicle is not a violation by itself. Murmurs spread through the crowd. I noticed several neighbors exchanging embarrassed looks. The story was unraveling quickly. The president rubbed his forehead. So what happens now? The second official slid a paper across the table. First, all fines related to this matter should be withdrawn. Second, the HOA will receive formal guidance on what it can and cannot regulate. The president nodded rapidly. Of course. Across the room, the complaining neighbor stared at her lap, jaw clenched. For the first time since this started, she seemed small. As the officials prepared to leave, one of them turned to me. "Officer, thanks for your patience." I nodded. "Just trying to live quietly." He smiled knowingly. "Sometimes that's the hardest part." When the doors closed behind them, the room stayed silent for several seconds. Then conversations erupted all at once. The HOA board looked shaken. The president shuffled papers nervously. "We'll be rescinding the fines," he announced weakly. People began standing, gathering their things, whispering. The meeting was effectively over. As I walked toward the exit, the complaining neighbor suddenly stepped in front of me. "This isn't over," she said quietly. I paused. Something in her tone felt different, less angry, more desperate. And that's when I realized she wasn't just upset about the patrol car. She had another reason for targeting me. And I was about to find out what it was. I stopped in the hallway, the noise from the meeting fading behind me. The complaining neighbor stood there, arms folded tightly, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not confidence, fear mixed with frustration. "What do you mean?" I asked calmly. She hesitated, glancing back toward the meeting room to make sure no one was listening. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "Ever since that car started sitting outside, people talk. They watch. It changes things." I frowned. "It's just my work vehicle." "To you," she snapped softly. "But to others, it means trouble." Before I could answer, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with more questions than clarity. I drove home that night thinking about her words. Something didn't add up. People don't start neighborhood wars just because they dislike parked cars. There was always a deeper reason. The next morning, I got my answer. A fellow officer called me during breakfast. "Hey, random question," he said. "Does your HOA happen to include a property on Oakview Lane?" "That's my street," I replied. He paused. "Interesting. We've been looking into complaints from that area. Noise violations, suspicious activity, late-night gatherings. Calls keep coming in, but nobody wants to officially report anything." I looked out my window toward the quiet street. "Anything specific?" I asked. "Not yet," he said. "Just patterns." After hanging up, I noticed movement across the street. The neighbor was loading boxes into her garage quickly, glancing around like she didn't want attention. My instincts kicked in. I wasn't on duty, but years in law enforcement teach you to notice behavior that doesn't match the environment. Later that afternoon, another neighbor stopped by while walking his dog. "You know," he said nervously, "people feel safer with your car here." I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" He nodded. "There have been things happening. Packages disappearing. Cars being opened at night. Folks didn't want to say anything at HOA meetings because some people shut the conversation down. Some people." The puzzle pieces started connecting. That evening, I watched from my porch as the complaining neighbor paced on her phone, speaking quickly, repeatedly looking toward my house. She noticed me and immediately turned away. The next day, an anonymous tip came through the department about suspicious deliveries tied to an address on my street. Her address. I took a slow breath. Suddenly, the obsession with removing a police vehicle from the neighborhood made sense. It wasn't about community comfort. It was about visibility, presence, the idea that law enforcement was too close for comfort. I stayed quiet. Off-duty meant no direct action, but information flows fast when people realize they're not invisible. That night, 2 unmarked cars rolled slowly through the neighborhood. Nothing dramatic, just observation, routine. The neighbor noticed instantly. Curtains moved. Garage door closed quickly. I realized something important then. She wasn't trying to enforce rules. She was trying to push me away. And now, whatever she was hiding had become nervous. As I watched the street settle into darkness, my phone buzzed with a message from my partner. You might want to keep your eyes open tomorrow. I stared at the screen, feeling the shift. Whatever was coming next, this HOA drama was about to turn into something much bigger than a parking complaint. I barely slept that night. The message from my partner replayed in my mind. Keep your eyes open tomorrow. As a police officer, you learn to trust instincts, especially when patterns start forming. The quiet street outside looked peaceful, but something about it felt different, like the calm before a storm. Morning arrived slower than usual. I stepped outside with coffee in hand and immediately noticed the difference. A white van sat farther down the street, engine off, windows tinted. Not unusual on its own, but my training made me scan details automatically. Another car I didn't recognize passed slowly, then circled back 10 minutes later. Across the street, the complaining neighbor was already outside, pacing. She kept checking her phone. By noon, whispers spread among neighbors. 2 residents mentioned seeing unfamiliar people walking near mailboxes. Someone reported packages missing again. The street felt tense, like everyone sensed something but couldn't name it. I texted my partner casually, "You watching this?" His reply came fast. "Yep. Stay normal." That meant there was already something happening behind the scenes. I went about my day, washing my car, trimming hedges, doing everything to appear ordinary. But every movement around me felt amplified. The neighbor watched from her window constantly. Once, our eyes met, and she immediately looked away. Then things escalated. Late afternoon, 2 unmarked vehicles parked at opposite ends of the street. They didn't hide what they were anymore. A few neighbors noticed and started whispering. The HOA president stepped outside his house, confused, glancing around nervously. The complaining neighbor came out moments later and froze. Her posture changed instantly. She grabbed her phone and made a call, speaking quickly. Her voice carried just enough for me to hear panic. "I don't know why they're here. No, they're just sitting. Yes, right now." My heart rate slowed instead of rising. That's what training does, calm when chaos begins. Minutes later, an unmarked car door opened. 2 plainclothes officers stepped out and moved toward her house calmly, professionally. No shouting, no drama, just purpose. Neighbors gathered quietly on sidewalks, pretending not to watch. She backed toward her front door, shaking her head as the officers spoke. Even from my driveway, I could see the confidence she'd carried for weeks disappearing. The HOA president walked over to me slowly. "Do you know what's happening?" I shrugged slightly. "Looks like official business." He swallowed hard. One officer knocked again, then held up paperwork, a warrant. The neighborhood fell silent. The same woman who complained endlessly about my patrol car now looked terrified of the people standing in front of her home. She glanced down the street, straight at my driveway. For a second, our eyes met. There was accusation there, but also realization. She finally understood that the police car she tried so hard to remove had never been the threat. It was the warning. The officers entered her house. Minutes felt like hours. Everyone waited. When they came out, they weren't alone. Handcuffs clicked loudly in the quiet air. Gasps rippled through the neighbors. The HOA president looked stunned. What did she do?" I didn't answer, because as the patrol vehicle pulled away, I realized this story still wasn't over. Someone else was watching, and they didn't look surprised at all. The patrol car disappeared around the corner, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt unreal. Neighbors stood frozen on sidewalks, whispering in disbelief. The woman who had complained about my police vehicle for weeks was gone, taken away in handcuffs while everyone watched. But what shocked people most wasn't the arrest. It was the realization that they never truly knew their neighbor. The HOA president rubbed his forehead, clearly overwhelmed. I don't understand," he muttered. "She was always the one enforcing rules." I didn't respond. I'd learned long ago that the loudest voices about rules sometimes hide the biggest secrets. Within an hour, rumors spread through the entire community. Some said fraud, others whispered about stolen packages. A few claimed she was part of something bigger. Social media groups lit up with speculation, but nobody actually knew the truth yet. Then my phone rang. It was my partner. "You're going to hear things," he said. "Just keep quiet for now." "Serious?" I asked. "Very," he replied. "Long investigation. That's all I can say." I looked down the street at her now empty house. Garage door open. Boxes half loaded inside. It hit me that she might have been planning to leave. Maybe she thought getting my patrol car removed would make things easier. Less attention, fewer eyes, fewer questions. Instead, it did the opposite. As evening fell, neighbors started approaching me one by one. Some apologized for staying silent during the HOA meetings. Others admitted they felt uncomfortable but didn't know why. "I guess you being here wasn't the problem," one man said quietly. I smiled slightly. Never was. That night, the HOA sent a mass email. The tone was completely different. Formal, cautious, almost defensive. They announced all fines against me were cancelled and promised to review enforcement procedures moving forward. No mention of the arrest. No explanation. Just silence where confidence used to be. The next morning, moving trucks arrived at the neighbor's house. Family members, or maybe legal representatives, cleared belongings quickly under watchful eyes. The street felt strange without her presence. Like tension that had lingered for weeks suddenly vanished. Still, something bothered me. One detail didn't fit. As I sipped coffee on my porch, I remembered the way she looked at me in the hallway, fearful, not aggressive. It wasn't just about avoiding police attention. It was like she expected something to happen soon. She knew. Later that afternoon, my partner stopped by unofficially. "Can't give you details," he said, leaning against my patrol car. "But let's just say your neighborhood complaint accidentally sped things up." I raised an eyebrow, because she focused on me. He nodded. People trying to stay unnoticed usually avoid attention. She did the opposite. I let that sink in. The irony was almost unbelievable. By trying to push the police car away, she put herself under a brighter spotlight. As the sun set, the neighborhood finally felt calm again. Kids played outside. Neighbors waved. The patrol car in my driveway no longer felt controversial, it felt normal. But as I walked back inside, I noticed something unusual parked down the street. A black SUV. Dark windows, engine running, and the person inside wasn't watching her house. They were watching mine. The black SUV stayed parked at the end of the street long enough to make everyone nervous. Curtains moved again. Neighbors whispered. After everything that had happened, people were hyperaware of anything unusual. I stood at my doorway pretending to check the mail, casually studying the vehicle without drawing attention. It wasn't random. The engine stayed running. The driver never looked at their phone. Just watched. My instincts kicked in immediately. I sent a quick text to my partner. "Got someone observing my house." His reply came seconds later. "Stay calm. We know." I exhaled slowly. If they already knew, this wasn't a threat. It was part of something bigger. Minutes later, the SUV door opened. A man stepped out wearing plain clothes, confident but relaxed. He walked up my driveway with the kind of calm that comes from authority. When he reached me, he flashed a badge quickly. "Federal. Mind if we talk?" he asked. I nodded, surprised but not alarmed. We moved to the porch where he spoke quietly. "The situation with your neighbor," he said, "was connected to a larger investigation. Financial fraud, stolen shipments, and a network moving goods through quiet neighborhoods." I frowned. "And my driveway drama," he gave a small smile, "helped us more than you realize." Apparently, once she started filing complaints about a police vehicle, investigators noticed the unusual urgency. Most people avoid drawing attention to law enforcement. Her behavior stood out. Combined with ongoing surveillance, it confirmed suspicions they'd been building for months. "She wanted you gone," he said. "Your presence made operations difficult." That explained everything. The complaints, the panic, the desperate attempts to involve the HOA. She wasn't trying to protect the neighborhood, she was protecting herself. As we talked, the HOA president walked outside and froze when he saw the agent on my porch. He quickly looked away, suddenly very interested in his lawn. Word would spread fast. The agent stood to leave but paused. "You handled things well. Most people would have escalated." I laughed lightly. "Comes with the job." He nodded, then walked back to the SUV, which drove away quietly, leaving the street peaceful again. That evening, something unexpected happened. Neighbors began stopping by, some with apologies, others with friendly conversations that had never existed before. The patrol car that once caused panic now felt like a symbol of safety. Even the WA president came over awkwardly. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I shrugged. Let's just move forward. As night settled in, I sat on my porch looking at the quiet street. It struck me how quickly narratives change. One week I was the problem. The next, people realized the real danger had been hiding in plain sight. The patrol car sat in my driveway, exactly where it had always been. Only now, nobody complained. Before going inside, I glanced across the street at the empty house. Lights off, curtains gone, silence.
Welcome to Karen Universe, where we dive into every wild, quirky, and intriguing story out there. A reminder that sometimes the largest person in the room is trying hardest to distract everyone else, and the finished part she complained about a police car without realizing the officer behind it was the one who intentionally ended everything. If you enjoyed the, don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends and drop your thoughts in the comments.